David Buckner is here. He is a professor of organizational leadership at Columbia University, and I wanted to talk to you, David. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Do you disagree with what I just said?
No, we are monetizing our debt.
Okay. You know that the Fed chairman, Ben Bernanke, said we'd never do that?
Yeah, he did say that, but it's a backdoor approach.
Oh, so in other words, they're being weasels about it.
Well, no, it's a backdoor approach. It's legal. It just is not communicated broadly, so people don't understand what we're really doing.
It's legal in the way that the CDOs and all the things that got us into this mess were legal, right?
It's technically correct. It just may not be complete in its information.
Okay. I want to show you this. Okay. Tell me where I'm wrong. This just happened a couple of weeks ago. Was it last week that this happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
Last Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay. So they go and they sell all of our bonds, our debt.
Correct. They sell it to the broader market, to the primary buyer.
Primary buyer. And they sell this, and they're saying, hey, who wants a share of America? No, there were no buyers. Nobody was really interested. There was a real kind of a problem, kind of a tension last week. So the primary buyers, they did eventually buy it up. They buy 7-year bonds.
And they're 7-year bonds. They're long-term bonds.
We owe this in 7 years.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. After 10 days, these people buy those 7 years bonds, and after 10 days, they sell them
to the Federal Reserve.
Oh my gosh.
It was just coincidental, as you know.
Was it? Was it? No, that happened last
Well, that's the back door. That is the back door. And the Fed goes in and they buy it. And the only issue here is that the Fed had indicated in advance that these would be in demand, as did the federal government. So if they're in demand, there's no need for the Fed to backstop it.
Right.
But the Fed comes in and backstops it in a secondary market after the primary buyer had bought it, only within 10 days.
Right.
There's no evidence that there was any agreement in advance, but 47% of the entire amount
is
reabsorbed.
That? How did they
bought it back from the primary?
How did they? What did they buy it with?
They buy it with paper that they print.
What does that mean?
That's the monetization of debt. They print money and they exchange the money for the piece of paper that the government will pay them in a later time.
This sounds a little to me like exactly what got us into this.
Well, it infuses the economy with cash, and that's what the Federal Reserve is supposed to do. They are supposed to be buyers and sellers of cash, to put money in and pull it out.
How long does this system last?
Depends on how much cash we put out there.
We don't know that, though, do we?
If they continue to put more cash, and we have two sources of cash right now. We have the president putting cash in stimulus funds. That's coming from taxpayers, theoretically, or debt, okay? And then you have this being printed. The volume of the double infusion of cash creates that fear of inflation.
Okay.
And how long does it last?
Right.
As either if this volume is so grand that inflation becomes hyperinflation, as you've discussed, we have a problem.
Yeah, but we have a problem, David, because if I'm not mistaken, I don't have my here I got a chalkboard. If I'm not mistaken, the problem is we're filling, as the market goes down, we're filling all of this with cash.
It's an artificial infusion or stimulus.
Right. And the secret to survival is to know when the bottom hits.
Correct.
So you can then, as the market comes back up, all this cash isn't pushed out.
Correct.
Okay? Because that's what causes hyperinflation.
Correct.
Okay. We're still probably going down here. We still have a lot more.
No one knows.
Yeah,
but agreed. We're in that direction.
We're in that direction.
The trajectory is
probably going this direction. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we have all of this cash that we still have to fill in. So that's all the stuff that we still have to sell. We still have to sell treasuries, we still have to get loans, so there's a lot more money coming. If this thing kicks back in, all of this money has to be sucked back into the...
It's got to be pulled back by the treasury.
How do they do that?
Well, the way in which they can do that is they pull back the debt. The government pays back the debt.
How? They buy it?
It's got to be an increase in tax. No, they really do pay it back. It's got to be an increase in taxes, and that increase in taxes, by the way, could come through inflation. Okay, it's got to be
Explain that.
Well, this is the dirty little secret of government that economists know and people don't talk about. Would you prefer to make 10% on $100 or 10% on 1,000? Clearly, 10% on 1,000. So if we receive inflation and prices go up, everybody says that a government would not like inflation. Technically, that's not true because a government can collect many more tax dollars if we have inflation without raising the tax rate once. It's politically popular, but it pulls a ton of money out.
Okay. So how do you stop that cycle, though?
Well, there's only two things the government would do. They either tax more or hope for inflation. Neither one of those are hopeful promises for people. I'll say it again. They either tax more, take money straight out of the pockets of Americans, or hope for inflation where it will naturally pull money out of the pockets of Americans.
They will hope for inflation.
They will. It's called the government temptation.
So, David, yesterday I did a show. Did you see the show last night?
I heard it.
Okay. I did the show, and I talked about these crazy things that these czars are saying. Okay? They're talking, the president is saying, I'm not going to snuff out grandma, and I don't think the president wants to snuff out anybody. But we have tough decisions to make, especially if you're in government-run health care.
Right.
So you're in government-run health care. They're saying that they'll only do these things where they're going to cut off the fringes, the early life and the late stages of life for health care, if we hit a crisis. Is this a crisis?
This is a crisis in the sense that if we flood the economy with so much cash, like Zimbabwe, your example, and that's really on the extreme. But like Zimbabwe or any other Argentina of the 1970s. Once it starts, you can't control it, though.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
They can't immediately pull the water back. Right. And the metaphor of the water is all of the cash that's flooded out.
Is what is happening here have any kind of relationship or feel to you, as somebody who knows this system, of an Enron or the CDOs? I know you're saying that it's legal, but is it...
See, much of what Enron did was legal, or we wouldn't have needed Sarbanes-Oxley to rectify it. So they were doing things that were technically correct. They were not ethical. They were not ethical, but they were technically correct.
Ethical?
I think my challenge here from a purely ethical perspective is the fact that you are waiting for these bond buyers to go out and buy it in the primary markets, and then you're coming around the other side, absorbing it. You either go out and buy it initially and let everybody know you're going to absorb 47% of the market. Don't tell everybody that there's demand for this. Or secondly, recognize that 10 days seems to smack of something that is a little bit more planned.
Let me, because I've got 10 seconds here. Let me ask you this: we're early on this loan thing. We've got to have, there's billions of more dollars that we're going to need just to hold this thing together. If they're doing it this early on, what does our bond sales look like a year from now?
That's challenging and troubling because Geithner has already asked for the increase.
Debt ceiling.
Yeah, the debt ceiling to go up, beyond the 12 trillion. I mean, it's just bizarre numbers. When he's asking for that at this point, we're only 8 weeks out from that point. Yeah. He has to get it or we don't get it. We do not have an opportunity to absorb that so quickly, even if the markets come back in an efficient fashion.
Thank you very much.